Have you ever watched someone laugh at your pain, then live long enough to see that same laugh get stuck in their throat? It happened to me, and I'll never forget the sound of that silence when the tables finally turned. I wasn't planning to say anything that day. I didn't show up to the barbecue to start drama or get even. I came for the grilled corn, and maybe to see my dad sneak sips of wine from a travel mug he thought no one noticed. I came because I still, after everything, showed up. That was kind of my thing. The quiet sister, the dependable one, the one who smiled and nodded while Brooke made jokes at my expense, just loud enough for the whole family to hear. But that day, something inside me snapped. Or maybe it clicked into place. Because when she tilted her head, squinted at my baby, and let out that ridiculous laugh about his hair, Eli's beautiful coppery curls, something surged in my chest that felt almost calm. "Jason McCarthy," I said, like I was placing an order, like I wasn't dropping a bomb that would level everything Brooke ever thought she knew about herself. Her face. God, I wish I could have bottled that expression and kept it forever. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Growing up in Houston, Brooke was always Brooke. That girl. The one with the big laugh, the big hair, the big presence. People noticed her when she walked into a room. I faded into the wallpaper. I wasn't jealous. At least, I didn't think I was. I just learned early that some people are spotlights, and others are shadows. I lived in hers for most of my life. Brooke had the high school boyfriends, the college adventures, the early engagement she bragged about for 3 years before it fizzled out. She was the kind of woman who made chaos look charming. Me? I was late bloomer central. I didn't date much. I didn't party. I wore cardigans in July and read parenting blogs even before I had anyone to parent. When I met David at 31, I was already bracing myself for the timeline panic. Everyone else was posting toddler milestones. I was just learning how to split the rent with a guy who didn't use 3-in-1 shampoo. But David was kind, steady, and when he proposed on my 34th birthday, I said yes with a weird mix of joy and urgency, like I was running behind and finally catching up. Then came the trying, the charts, the appointments, the whispered questions from my mother about ovulation, and Brooke, always Brooke, with her arched eyebrow and little digs. "You waited too long," she said one Thanksgiving, swirling wine in her glass like a smug witch. "Some women just aren't meant to be moms." I pretended I didn't hear her. My uterus had just betrayed me for the second time that month, and my skin felt like it would crack if I moved too quickly. I laughed politely as if she were joking, but inside, I was screaming. Brooke had never wanted kids. She made that clear during every family dinner with a speech about choosing freedom and preserving her body, which was fine, except she couldn't just leave it at that. She had to make being childless sound superior, like my desire for a family was some kind of sad, outdated fantasy, like I was pathetic for hoping. When IVF failed twice, I didn't tell anyone except David. The hormones wrecked me. I was bloated, bruised, crying at peanut butter commercials. Every failed cycle felt like a funeral. And Brooke? She kept the jokes coming. "Maybe you should just borrow a baby from Pinterest," she snorted once, and the whole table burst out laughing. I did too, because what else was I going to do? Cry in the mashed potatoes? But I never gave up. The doctor suggested donor sperm as a last resort. David hesitated at first, but he loved me enough to let go of biology. I remember signing the forms with shaky hands, thinking, this isn't how I imagined it. But maybe this is how it begins. We didn't know who the donor was. That's kind of the point. But we got a basic profile. He was tall, smart, red-haired. We picked him because his answers on the questionnaire were thoughtful, not cocky. There was something in the way he described childhood memories that made me believe he'd been a good person. That mattered to me. When I found out I was pregnant, I sobbed in the clinic parking lot. Full-on ugly cried in my Corolla, forehead against the steering wheel. I didn't care that it wasn't conventional. I was going to be a mother. But fate, it turns out, doesn't do conventional. And the universe? She's got a brutal sense of humor. The pregnancy was mostly smooth, at least compared to everything that came before it. No major complications, no scary ultrasounds, no cryptic doctor visits that sent me spiraling into Google rabbit holes at 2 a.m. Just a lot of nausea, a lot of back pain, and an overwhelming sense of disbelief that it was actually happening. I was going to be a mom. David was great. He always had been. But something shifted in him after the donor. He never said it out loud, but I could feel it in the way he hesitated before telling people, in the way he smiled just a little too tightly at baby showers, like he was trying to force himself to feel ownership, to be all in. I understood it, and I never blamed him. But deep down I also knew that something between us had quietly cracked the moment we signed that form. It was no one's fault, just reality. Still, when Eli was born, none of that mattered. He came into the world screaming like a tiny, furious dictator, and the second they placed him on my chest, I felt something I'd never felt before. Like every bruised part of me finally exhaled. He was real. He was mine. He had this ridiculous tuft of red hair that stood straight up like a matchstick, and eyes that changed color every day for the first month. And even though he didn't share a single strand of my DNA, I swear he looked at me like he'd known me for lifetimes. We didn't tell anyone about the donor, not because we were ashamed, but because we knew exactly how our families would react. Or rather, how Brooke would react. She would take one look at Eli, sniff out the mystery like blood in the water, and turn it into some kind of spectacle. She always did. So we kept it simple. We said the pregnancy had been a process, and people filled in the blanks themselves. I was fine with that. I just wanted peace. For the first time in years, I had something that was mine, untouched by Brooke's sarcasm, by family comparisons, by years of being the afterthought. Eli gave me a center I never had before. My days were sleepless, messy, and chaotic, but they were ours, and I guarded them fiercely. It wasn't until Eli was almost 9 months old that the past came crashing back in. The call from the clinic came on a rainy Tuesday, one of those Texas downpours that makes everything feel cinematic, even when you're just standing in your kitchen in mismatched socks. It was a nurse I didn't recognize. She was polite, professional, and apologetic about a minor paperwork issue. Something about donor file confirmations and a recent system update. I barely listened. Eli was chewing on a wooden spoon at my feet, and my brain was foggy from teething-induced sleep deprivation. Then she said the name. "Just to confirm, the donor listed on your file is Jason McCarthy." Time stopped. Like, actually stopped. I think I said uh-huh, but I couldn't be sure. My ears were ringing. My stomach dropped straight to the floor. Jason McCarthy, as in Brooke's Jason. The Jason she dated on and off for nearly 6 years. The one she cried over in my childhood bedroom after their first breakup. The one she got back together with twice. Both times swearing this time is different. The one she always called the one that got away, whenever she was tipsy and bitter at weddings. I hadn't heard his name in years. He moved away after grad school, and Brooke eventually met some tech guy with a boat and a ski pass, and forgot about Jason, at least outwardly. But the way she used to talk about him, I knew he had left a mark. And now, that man's DNA was in my son. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't even unethical. Sperm donors are anonymous, randomized by code. There are a million safeguards. But the odds of that match, of me, out of thousands of files, choosing the one man who defined my sister's heartbreak, it felt like fate had been waiting to deliver this punchline. I didn't tell anyone. Not at first. What would I even say? Surprise. My baby's dad is your ex? It was too bizarre. Too loaded. I needed time to process. So I buried it deep and kept going. Changed diapers. Bounced Eli at 3 a.m., made small talk with David that didn't touch the growing rift between us. Until the barbecue. It was a basic Sunday afternoon thing. Mom's backyard, folding chairs, paper plates, Brooke in a designer romper, pretending not to notice the way ketchup was about to hit her suede sandals. I hadn't even wanted to go, but Mom insisted it had been too long. So I packed the diaper bag, put Eli in a sun hat, and went. Everything was fine. Casual, even. Brooke was in one of her performative moods, telling stories about her latest vacation and laughing too loudly at her own jokes. I kept my head down, focused on Eli's applesauce, and counted the minutes. Then she said it. She leaned over, peered at Eli, and tilted her head with that little smirk I knew too well. "So red," she said, drawing out the words like she was narrating a crime scene. "No one in our family has red hair. Wonder where that came from." Everyone chuckled. Lightly. No one thought twice about it. But I felt the temperature drop behind my ribs, and I said it. I didn't plan to, but the words came out clean and sharp. "Jason McCarthy." Brooke's head snapped toward me like she'd been slapped. "What?" I didn't blink. "That's where the red hair came from." The silence was immediate, a full, heavy quiet that flattened the noise of the backyard in one breath. I didn't offer more, didn't explain. I just picked up Eli, pressed a kiss to his forehead, and walked away. Behind me, I heard Brooke choke out something. Maybe my name, maybe a curse, but I didn't stop. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the punchline. I wasn't the quiet one in the corner, smiling through the sting. For the first time, I had the last word. But that was just the beginning. Because you don't humiliate someone like Brooke in public and expect it to end cleanly. No. She came back swinging. It started small. A few days after the barbecue, my mom called me sounding confused. "Is everything okay between you and Brooke?" she asked, her voice tight with that specific kind of maternal concern that always made me feel like a guilty teenager. I played dumb, said things were fine. She didn't push, but I could tell something was swirling behind the scenes. A week later, it became clear. Brooke had been planting seeds. Little comments to my mom about Samantha acting strange lately, or how some people clearly don't understand boundaries. Apparently, she'd even hinted that I might be emotionally unstable after giving birth and was lashing out in weird ways. I wanted to scream. She was spinning a whole narrative to erase that one moment, turning my calm, deliberate truth into some postpartum hallucination. But I didn't take the bait. I stayed quiet. I let her unravel in the background while I went back to being what I'd always been. Quiet. Measured. Invisible. Except this time I wasn't hiding. I was watching. Then the real hit came. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was scrolling mindlessly through Facebook while Eli napped, and I saw it. Brooke had posted a photo from the barbecue. It was a wide family shot, everyone smiling. But the caption? "Red hair doesn't lie." Some people just love leftovers. No tags, no context. But everyone who knew us, everyone, would understand exactly what she meant. I sat there staring at it, hands shaking, heart hammering in my ears. The comments were vague but brutal. "Yikes, tea spilled." "Wait, are you saying what I think you're saying?" She really went there. The worst part? David saw it too. He came home that night unusually quiet, kissed Eli on the head, barely looked at me, and went straight to the bedroom. I followed him in, tension crackling between us. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked, voice low. He didn't look up. "Talk about what?" I swallowed. "The post, you saw it." He nodded slowly, jaw tight. "Yeah, I saw it." And then came the question I had dreaded since the moment I heard Jason's name. "Did you know? Before you picked him?" It shattered me. That even he could think I had done this on purpose. Like I'd scrolled through a catalog of anonymous donors and said, "Ooh, let me emotionally ruin my sister." I told him the truth. That it was random. That I didn't know until months after Eli was born. That I hadn't said a word until Brooke cornered me with her snide little jab, and still he just sat there, silent. That silence stayed with us. For days. Then weeks. We didn't fight. Not exactly. We just slowly drifted into 2 different apartments that shared the same walls. I took care of Eli. He worked late. We moved like polite roommates. The laughter that used to float through the house like background music vanished. And all the while, Brooke ramped up. I started noticing little things. Friends unfollowing me. Subtle shade in family group chats. Invitations that somehow never reached me. She didn't just want revenge. She wanted exile. She wanted to remind me that I had crossed a line, and she was the one who drew it. But here's the thing about becoming a mother. Once you've birthed life, survived sleepless nights, and stared down your own breaking point at 3 a.m. with a screaming baby, you realize just how strong you really are, and just how much crap you're done tolerating. So I made a choice. If Brooke wanted war, she'd get one, but I wasn't going to fight her with gossip or petty Facebook posts. I wasn't going to roll around in the mud she lived in. I was going to dismantle her mask, piece by piece. I started with quiet research. I remembered Jason had gone into environmental consulting, and after a few late-night deep dives, I found a company in Denver that matched his name and background. A few more clicks led me to a LinkedIn profile. From there, an email. I didn't say much, just that I'd recently learned he was the donor used in a fertility clinic, and I had some questions if he was open to talking. I didn't expect a response. But he wrote back. Turns out he knew. Not about me, but that he'd been contacted by the clinic recently to some form update. He said he was shocked when he saw my name connected to the file, but had assumed it was a coincidence. We talked, carefully, cautiously. He was kind, thoughtful, nothing like I remembered from Brooke's filtered stories. He admitted donating during grad school to help pay off loans, never imagining it would lead to a child. I didn't ask for anything. No money, no involvement. I just told him about Eli, his curls, his laugh, his love for pears. I don't know why I needed to share it, but I did. And then he said something that changed everything. I'm not surprised Brooke still hasn't changed. She never wanted anything unless it belonged to someone else. That line stuck with me, because it was true. Growing up, I'd always thought Brooke was the prize. The magnetic one. The one people loved first and most. But now I saw it for what it was. A spotlight built on other people's silence. She thrived when no one challenged her. When I played the role of the passive sister. But not anymore. So the next time I saw her, at our cousin's engagement party, I was ready. I didn't go looking for drama. I wore a simple dress, brought Eli, smiled like everything was fine. But when she cornered me by the appetizer table, all fake sweetness and venom in her eyes, I knew she was about to strike. "I hear you've been messaging my ex," she said, her voice just low enough to be menacing. I met her eyes and smiled. "Yes. And you know what, Brooke? He remembers you exactly the way I do. That threw her. She blinked, caught off guard. What's that supposed to mean?" I leaned in, calm and measured. "That you never wanted him. Not really. You just didn't want me to have anything you couldn't control." And then I walked away. Not dramatic, not explosive, just final. That night, Brooke posted another cryptic story. Something about betrayal from within. I ignored it. Because for once, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't defending. I was just living. And slowly, the tide turned. Friends started drifting back, realizing Brooke's narrative didn't hold water. Family members grew colder toward her, warmer toward me. Even my mom, who had always enabled Brooke's larger-than-life attitude, pulled me aside one day and said quietly, "I'm proud of you." I never said it enough before. But the biggest shift? David. One night I found him watching Eli sleep, tears in his eyes. He turned to me and said, "I don't care whose DNA he has. He's mine. You're mine. I lost myself for a while." We sat in silence, holding each other, letting the past weeks bleed out into forgiveness. And for the first time in a long time, I believed we might actually be okay. But the twist? It wasn't over. Because just when I thought the storm had passed, another truth surfaced. And this one? It didn't come from Brooke. It came from Jason. It started with an email. Simple, unassuming, no dramatic subject line. Just, "Hi again. Something's come up that I think you should know." I read it twice before opening. My chest tightened the way it always did when my brain expected bad news. Jason wasn't someone I had regular contact with. I had assumed our polite back and forth was over, a brief and odd intersection of our lives. But clearly he hadn't let it go. The message was brief, but it hit like a freight train. Jason had been contacted by another family. Another woman. She had a son, a little older than Eli. Same donor code, same red curls. She had seen my comments on an anonymous donor forum, a post I'd made weeks ago asking how other parents handled telling their kids about their origins. Jason had found the post too, and the woman had recognized his initials in my description. She reached out to him directly, and just like that, we weren't the only ones in this story anymore. I sat there, rereading the message over and over, while Eli napped beside me. My brain spun. I'd known in theory that donor-conceived children might have half-siblings out there. But to know it? To see it taking shape like this? It was real now. Jason attached a photo the other mother had shared with him. The resemblance to Eli was jarring. Same sharp chin, same fire-red crown, same dimpled grin. I didn't know what to feel. Excitement, fear, curiosity. But before I could settle on any of those, I saw the next line in Jason's email. And that's not all. There's a third. Possibly more. I had to stand up. I paced the living room like a caged animal, heart racing, head spinning. 3 children, from the same donor, within the same region, all born within 5 years. I hadn't just brought Eli into a family of one. I'd unknowingly tied him to a web of strangers, with pieces of himself scattered across the state like puzzle fragments. It was overwhelming. But it also stirred something else in me. Something sharp. Not fear this time. Anger. Not at Jason, not at Eli, not at the other mothers. At Brooke. Because she'd been so consumed with turning my child into a punchline, into some twisted form of revenge for a relationship that she had walked away from. She never once considered that the story didn't begin or end with her. I had protected her once. I had said Jason's name softly. I had let her believe that moment was between us, poetic and private. But now I saw clearly. She wasn't the center of this story. She was a footnote, and it was time she realized it. The next family gathering was Eli's first birthday. I decided to go big. Maybe because I needed a win. Maybe because I wanted to make a statement. Maybe deep down because I knew Brooke would be there, and I wanted her to see exactly what she'd underestimated. We rented a local community hall with a garden. I had balloons, custom cookies with Eli's face on them, little party favors that matched his favorite book. My mom helped set up. David grilled hot dogs. It was simple, sweet, joyful, and crowded, because I'd invited the other 2 mothers. We'd spoken on the phone the week before, tentatively, carefully. It was awkward at first, but the second we started describing our kids' quirks, everything changed. We laughed about their stubborn streaks, their messy eating, their love for music. It felt like talking to a distant cousin you'd just met, but somehow knew. I told them about the party, said no pressure, but both of them said yes. And so there they were, 2 women I'd never known existed, standing beside me, holding their own little red-haired whirlwinds. The kids played together like magnets, instinctively drawn to one another, laughing, tugging on each other's sleeves, wrestling over a toy truck. The moment was surreal. And then I saw her. Brooke. She walked in wearing white, like she always did, like she couldn't stand not being the brightest object in the room. Her smile was forced. Her eyes scanned the scene with laser precision. And then she saw them. The kids. The other kids. She froze. I didn't move. I just watched. She walked slowly toward me, past the balloons and the gifts and the crowd of parents. Her heels clicked against the tile like accusations. When she reached me, she didn't even fake a smile. "Are you serious?" she hissed under her breath. I tilted my head. "About what?" She glanced over at the 2 women. "You invited them." I nodded. "Of course I did. They're family." Her eyes blazed. "This isn't about Eli anymore, is it? This is about making me look stupid." I took a deep breath. I had planned to stay calm, but I'd held my tongue long enough. "No, Brooke," I said, voice steady. "You did that part all by yourself." She recoiled slightly, as if the words physically hit her. "Good. You don't get to humiliate me, mock my child, and then act like you're the victim. You made this personal. You made him a target. I'm just reminding you that this isn't your narrative to control." For the first time in a long time, she looked small. No retort, no eye roll, just this blank, stunned silence. And then she left. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't fake an excuse. Just turned and walked out the door. White heels clacking faster now, swallowed by the parking lot and the weight of her own embarrassment. And the party went on. David smiled at me across the room, relief in his eyes. My mom hugged the other mothers. Eli shoved cake in his mouth and giggled like a maniac. And for the first time in what felt like years, I felt peace. But peace has a funny way of being temporary, because 2 weeks later I got a letter. No return address. Just my name, handwritten. Inside, one typed sheet of paper. "If you think this is over, you're wrong. You've taken something from me. You don't get to walk away clean." There was no signature, but I didn't need one. I knew exactly who sent it. At first, I just stared at the letter, waiting for my hands to stop shaking. There was no stamp. It hadn't come through the mail, which meant it had been dropped off. By hand. Someone had walked up to my porch, slipped this into my mailbox, and left without a word. It didn't take a genius to guess who. But the fact that Brooke didn't sign it didn't surprise me. This wasn't about confrontation. This was about control, and threats were her final currency. I read it again, slowly this time. "You don't get to walk away clean." As if she thought I had committed some crime against her, as if defending my child, surrounding him with people who loved him, and refusing to shrink into the background made me the villain. It was almost laughable, if it hadn't been so terrifying. For a few days, I didn't tell anyone. I kept the letter folded in the drawer of Eli's changing table, beneath extra wipes and diapers, as if burying it under everyday life would make it disappear. But it didn't. It lingered in my chest like static. Every time the doorbell rang unexpectedly, every time I walked Eli to the park and noticed someone parked too long nearby, I felt it again. That cold awareness. The unease that comes when someone who should have been your protector turns into your shadow. Eventually, I showed it to David. He read it silently, jaw tightening. He didn't say "I told you so." Didn't gloat about his long-standing theory that Brooke had always been unstable beneath the gloss. He just asked the one thing I was too proud to admit I'd been asking myself. "Do you want to go to the police?" I shook my head. "It's just a letter. No threat, no name. It's not enough." "But it's her." "Yeah," I said quietly. "It is." In the weeks that followed, things calmed on the surface. Brooke didn't show up at family dinners. She stopped calling our mom. No texts, no birthday wishes, no barbed comments online. Just radio silence. The kind of silence that makes you more nervous because you don't know where the next blow will come from. I tried to focus on Eli. He was walking now. Wobbly, determined little steps that made my heart ache with love. He'd clap when he managed more than 5 steps in a row, proud of himself. And when he fell, he never cried, just looked up, grinned, and tried again. Resilient. Unshakable. I held on to that. Meanwhile, I stayed in touch with the other 2 moms. We created a little group chat. Team Redheads, we called it. We sent photos, shared milestones, even joked about one day having a reunion for all the donor siblings. It helped, knowing there were others out there who'd walked a similar path, who didn't judge the decisions I'd made, who understood that being a mother sometimes meant standing alone against people you used to love. Then came the second letter. This one was different. It was longer. 4 pages. Typed again. And it wasn't angry. It was calculated. Brooke had taken the time to list everything she believed I had stolen from her. Jason. Our family's attention. The last name she once thought would be hers. Her right to be the first mother in our family. Even, this part chilled me, the physical legacy of someone I loved. That's how she described Eli. Not as a child. Not as my son. As a physical legacy. I don't remember finishing the letter. I remember ripping it up in 4 violent motions and throwing it into the trash before my hands could start shaking again. but the words stayed in my mind like smoke that wouldn't clear. Brooke had unraveled. It wasn't about the baby anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about obsession. She had become obsessed with the idea that Eli was hers, should have been hers, that I had taken a path she never dared consider, that by doing what she always mocked, I had ended up with something she'd secretly wanted more than anything. A child, a future, proof that she wasn't at the center of everything anymore. And she couldn't bear it. It all came to a head one afternoon in late spring. I was home with Eli folding laundry when I heard a loud bang against the front door. Not a knock. A slam. I froze. My heart kicked into high gear as I walked slowly toward the door, Eli watching from the playpen. When I opened it, she was standing there. Brooke. Wind-blown hair, sunglasses on, lips pressed into a line, and in her hand, a folder. She didn't ask to come in. She just pushed the folder into my chest and said, "You might want to read that before I take things further." Then she turned around and walked off my porch. I didn't call after her. I didn't ask questions. I just stood there, staring down at the folder she'd shoved into my arms like a bomb. Inside, papers, old emails, screenshots, photos, Jason and Brooke in college, laughing on beaches, kissing at parties. One picture, him asleep in her bed. Another, her wearing one of his shirts. She had printed every photo she could find of them together, annotated some of them with captions like, "Spring Break 2010. He told me he wanted kids someday," and stapled to the front page, a handwritten note. "He was mine first. You'll never change that. And one day he'll realize what you did." That was the moment I realized this wouldn't end with silence. Brooke wasn't going to fade into the background. She wanted a war. She was building her case, assembling her twisted version of the truth. She wanted to reclaim a ghost. She wanted to rewrite a story that had already moved on without her. And I had no idea how far she was willing to go. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with Eli's baby monitor pressed against my chest, the soft static like white noise against the storm in my mind. The folder sat on my kitchen counter like a loaded gun. I didn't have to open it again. I'd already memorized every image, every scribbled note Brooke had scrawled in the margins like it was her manifesto. And yet, I kept going back. I kept staring at one specific line she'd written on the back of a photo of her and Jason laughing in a hammock. He said I was unforgettable, that no matter what happened, a piece of him would always be mine. I didn't doubt that Jason had once loved her. I didn't even doubt he might have said something like that in his early 20s, drunk on cheap wine and possibility. But time had passed. People changed. Lives moved on. And Jason had given that piece of himself willingly. To a system, to anonymity, to chance. I hadn't stolen anything from her. I had followed a path he'd left open, not one she'd marked for herself. Still, I couldn't ignore the threat woven beneath her words. The insinuation that she might not just obsess over Eli from a distance, that she might try something else, something worse. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I explained everything, from the letters to the doorstep confrontation, to the folder of obsessive memorabilia. I watched her expression shift from professional concern to something closer to alarm as I laid it all out. "You need to document everything," she said, "and you need to be prepared to file for a restraining order if this escalates." "Can I do that without involving Jason?" I asked, already imagining the awkwardness, the explanations, the possible fallout. "You should tell him," she said gently. "He's connected to this, even if only biologically. And if Brooke's starting to blur the lines between memory and entitlement, it's safer for all of you to be on the same page." I waited another week. I didn't want to, but I needed time to build up the nerve. Then I wrote Jason an email. I told him about the letters, the photos, the fact that Brooke had found out somehow and couldn't let go. I didn't tell him everything. I didn't show him the folder. I just said I thought he should know, in case she ever tried to contact him. He called me the next day, and to my surprise, he wasn't angry. He wasn't even shocked. He sighed like a man who'd known for a long time that a thread was going to snap eventually. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I always knew Brooke had a hold on things. She used to tell me she'd never really let me go. But this is next level." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I think it's been building for a long time. Then he said something that stunned me. I'd like to meet him, if that's okay. I froze. "Eli?" "Yeah," he said. "Not to play dad, not to confuse him, just to see him, to understand. I gave this part of myself away for a reason, but I never imagined something real would come of it. My instinct was to protect, to say no, but something in me paused. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was the fact that Jason had, without knowing it, given me the greatest joy of my life, and now he was offering honesty, when Brooke had only ever offered control. So I said yes. We met at a park, neutral, safe, in the open. I brought Eli in his little red hoodie, his curls bouncing as he ran toward the swing set. Jason sat on a bench, quiet, thoughtful, watching him like he was seeing a memory and a miracle at the same time. "He's amazing," he said finally. "He looks like my brother did at that age." "I know," I said, and smiled. He didn't try to hold him. He didn't try to take credit. He just watched, and when he stood to leave, he said something I'll never forget. "You're doing a good job. He's lucky to have you." I think part of me needed that more than I realized. I told my lawyer about the meeting, about Jason's reaction. She nodded and said it was good to have that relationship documented, just in case. And so we filed the restraining order. It went through quietly with little fuss. Brooke never contested it. She never responded to the court notice. But I knew she got it, because the day after it arrived, she finally called. Blocked number. I answered anyway. Her voice was flat. Not angry, not pleading, just tired. "You always think you're better than me," she said. "No," I replied. "I just stopped needing your approval." "You used me. You waited. You took what was mine. He was never yours, Brooke, and neither was Eli." A pause, then a quiet, barely audible, "You don't deserve him." "I earned him," I said, my voice sharp with the years I'd spent crying in sterile clinics, the nights I'd held my belly praying for life to take root, the months of aching silence after each failed cycle. "You don't get to rewrite that." She didn't reply. The line went dead, and that was the last time I ever heard from her. She disappeared after that, deleted her socials, cut off even our mother. Rumor had it she moved out of state, tried to reinvent herself. I didn't chase after the details. I had everything I needed right in front of me. My son, my peace, my freedom from the years of biting my tongue and swallowing my tears. Eli turned 2 the following spring. He was wild and wonderful, obsessed with dinosaurs and blueberries and making mud pies in the backyard. He had Jason's curiosity, my quiet determination, and something entirely his own, a light that made people smile without knowing why. I never told him about Brooke. Maybe one day I will, in a way that makes sense for him. Maybe I'll say that sometimes family is complicated, that love can curdle when it's not returned, that some people confuse control with connection. But not today. Today we chase butterflies. We laugh in sunbeams. And when I look at him, I don't see Brooke's bitterness or Jason's past. I see Eli, whole, loved, mine. And if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Don't let anyone shame you for the way you build your life, especially if that life is built with hope, perseverance, and love. The people who laugh at you, who try to tear you down, they don't get to write your ending. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply happiness. Thanks for listening, and if you've ever been through anything similar, don't be afraid to share your story. Someone out there needs to hear it. We'd reached the end of the story, but real life, of course, doesn't tie itself up in neat little bows. Even now, years later, there are echoes, little things that sometimes catch me off guard. Like the time Eli asked why he had red hair, when no one else in the family did. or when I stumbled across one of Brooke's old journals while cleaning out our childhood attic. A relic of the past, filled with dramatic scribbles and dreams that never panned out the way she thought they would. I didn't read it. I didn't need to. But I didn't throw it away either. It reminded me of something important, something I think we all forget when we're in the middle of our own storms. People aren't always villains. Sometimes they're just broken. Sometimes they lash out not because they're cruel by nature, but because they don't know how to face their own failures without projecting them onto others. That doesn't excuse what Brooke did. It doesn't soften the cruelty of her words, or the obsessive way she tried to claw back what she thought she'd lost. But it helps me understand. And maybe that's the final step in moving on. Forgiveness doesn't mean I want her in my life. It just means I've stopped letting her live rent-free in my head. Eli's 5 now. He just started kindergarten. The same kid who once fit in the crook of my arm now carries a dinosaur backpack and insists on tying his shoes himself, even if it takes 5 minutes longer. He has a stubborn streak that drives me crazy sometimes, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. He also has Jason's laugh, and my eyes, and a heart that somehow remained wide open, untouched by the darkness that came before him. Jason? He stayed in touch, loosely. We send holiday cards, updates. He knows where the lines are. He respects them. Every so often he'll send Eli a birthday gift with a simple note, from a friend who thinks you're amazing. Eli doesn't ask much about him yet. When he does, I'll tell him the truth. In pieces, gentle and honest. I don't fear that conversation anymore. Because the truth is, I'm proud of how he came into the world, of what I overcame, of the quiet strength I didn't even know I had, until life forced me to find it. I once thought I'd feel shame if people knew the full story, that they'd whisper behind my back about using a donor, or that they'd laugh the way Brooke once did. But I've come to realize something deeply liberating. Shame only thrives in silence. And I'm not silent anymore. Sometimes I share my story with other women going through the same heartbreak. I tell them about the nights I cried on the bathroom floor, the way people judged me without understanding, the hope that kept flickering, no matter how many times it got stomped on. And when I tell them about Eli, their eyes light up, because he's proof that miracles don't always come wrapped in tradition. Sometimes they come through pain, through loss, through choosing to keep going, even when everyone says it's time to give up. And yes, sometimes justice arrives in the most poetic, unplanned ways. Like a donor database matching you with the ghost of your sister's one who got away. Like your child carrying the spark of a past that was never yours, and yet somehow belongs to you completely. If I could go back and talk to the me from 5 years ago, I'd tell her this. You will be okay. Better than okay. One day the tears will stop. The pitying looks will fade. The snide comments won't matter. And the child you dreamed of, he'll be real, he'll be yours. And he'll be worth every single second of the struggle. And your sister, she'll become just a chapter, not the ending. You, and only you, get to write the final pages.